Okay. So in order to handle those details, in order to handle the traditional, your life mission is to create the lexicon. And some of you know what I mean by the lexicon, right, Jill? The lexicon. Rosanna, remember that? And Lisa? Kialoa, you're not familiar. What I call lexicon is my collection of phrases, like keywords. Keywords and keywords and keywords. I call it a collection because I keep adding to it all the time. I call it a lexicon. And the lexicon pertains to combination of planets, literally. In a square, this one is square with that one. This one, there are all these possibilities. And it's a lifelong mission. Every time I come across something, I say, oh, that's a good keyword, and I'll put it in. So when you create this kind of collection in your mind, not in your mind, on your computer, not just in your mind, it's on the computer, it's in a file, then these are your tools for improving your traditional. The tools for improving your traditional analysis. And it has to do with an orb. Remember, it's always a question of an orb. Can I consider it a square? Is it a square? Is it not a square? All these things are part of these observation, planetary combination. And I find that not most of my students, all my students lack in that area, because they come up, and I know because I ask a question and I hear their responses. They come up with all these phrases either from a book or from another astrologer who has a different approach and so on. And when you don't have a good handle on the planetary combinations, then your interpretation becomes very high level, very general, very psychological, but without enough detail. And these details are necessary, again, to create the big picture of life. So, like I said, the big picture I get from the traditional, and then I move to the Uranian. And by the time I move to the Uranian analysis, I already have a good foundation of the person, the chart. But I know that the Uranian will give me more details. So by that time, I observe motifs and themes and planetary combination that get my attention in the traditional. And then I play a game with myself. I say, how will I see it in the Uranian? Will I see it on the dial as well? Or will the dial give me more information to elaborate on what I've seen? And we will see that, okay? Because that's the integration with Uranian. And oftentimes the dial adds the information to that question, but sometimes it adds other things that you didn't even think about. And this is the beauty. So when I move to the dial, I never know in advance, will I see it? Will I not see it? What will I see? It's like a big adventure. Again, it's the intellectual adventure. I call it intellectual adventure. So once you get to the dial, you begin to see tons of things, and then you need to decide, will I look at it and will I not look at it? And we have seen already a little in the little that we have covered, a little analysis chart that we have covered in this class. Because many times I will see something on the dial and I will say, I'm not dealing with that. I say to myself, this I'm not dealing with, either because I'm not sure what it means, or I'll leave it alone, maybe I'll come back to it. So this is what I'm trying to tell you big time. If you don't want to give up Uranian, if we want to continue with Uranian because there's so much information, tell yourself, I don't have to explain everything. Remember that. Don't feel obligated to interpret every little thing in the dial, because if you do, you'll give up right away. You'll be desperate. You say, I cannot handle it, because that's my way. And that goes on any level with any one of you, wherever you are at in the process. Give yourself permission to not interpret something. until you get to the point where you can interpret it, okay? There are, let's say, in my process, again, years of process with the Uranian, um, I remember thinking about volcanoes way back in my beginning. And with those Uranian, in order to get a gist of it, to get the feel for that, I used to go to the books from the planetary rules of planetary pictures, go turn the pages and look at all the places, not all, many places where volcanoes would appear. And see what's the motif, what's the connection, what's the underlying principle for volcanoes. And for years, okay, I did it. But then years later, I came up with another keyword, which is not different from the book. It's more like a nuance from what the book has, but it opened it up. And took me years to get there because I didn't forget it. So every time I look at things, it gets better from my beginning to this day, okay? Things get better all the time, consistently. So we continue to learn, we learn and teach ourselves. We become our own teachers by observation. And I'll give you an example with this Vulcanus. So Vulcanus in the book, many places, it has the keywords comes up with physical force, like vitality. Vitality also depends on the combination, like with the sun, vitality and physical strength and so on. So for years, that's what I had in mind for Vulcanus. And then I can't remember exactly when it came about. I realized that I can add a word to Vulcanus, and that's influence. Influence. That's not in the book, but it's very close to the core meaning in the book, influence. Because again, it was derivation of something from the book, and one thing that another came up with that influence many years ago. Fine. And then more recently, in the last years, a new buzzword came into our lives from the internet, people who are influencers, right? Many years ago, we did not have that word, influencers. And then I said, wait a minute, this is exactly the word that I use for volcanoes. Let's look. And then I think I still have a student recently, this is less than the past year, and very young, wonderful woman, young woman. And when I found out and then I did a reading for her. She came for a reading. Turned out that she isn't one of these influencers. And she had a whole program going on for years and years and years about being those influencers. And they sell products, it's about selling products. And true to form, she had this Vulcanus very either with the sun or with the Aries point or something. So now I can attack the Vulcanus a step further with those modern occupation that we didn't have 10 years ago or 40 years ago. Influences. And typically these influences are young people. They're teenagers and very young. Interestingly enough, that's apropos in integrating the information. At the time of the reading, which is a few months ago, that career came to an end for various reasons. Also in the chart, she had the Saturn return. As part of the Saturn return, that influencing career came to an end, and that was the discussion and the reading. What next? Long story short, the fact that Vulcanus is so strong in her chart, the factor of influence was not limited to the product that she sold on the YouTube channel. That was not it. She had a whole other line of her in her life, which had to do with helping people who are disabled. And I'm not telling you more than that, but it had to do with disabled people. But it was still is because it's part of her personal life as well. That I can tell you. So that's her life mission, not the selling products. Her life mission is that. But the way she talks about it, the way she plans how to do it, how she go about doing it, that part of her life will never go away. Because it's very personal. And you can see how the energy, the factor of influence is there also. So the quality of being an influencer is so ingrained in her that she's an influencer. No matter what she does, she's an influencer. You see what I'm telling you? So this is how you work with the keywords. You just keep observing. It comes up again and again in different ways. Who knew about influences? Now we have influences. All these things. um, so this is again example of what I call the lexicon, and you can add to your lexicon not only in the traditional but also in the Uranian world. Those Uranian, the trans-Neptunian planets. But then I suggest not to get carried away, not to change the main theme, not to bastardize it. Notice the word I used, bastardize, because it happens a lot in traditional astrology, in the traditional world. Bastardizing of astrology, what happened to the second house and the sixth house, what people say about it, I call it bastardizing, changing it completely, and it's useless. So if you keep a clean, straight line of the core of the meaning, you can add a little bit this way or that way, but you keep the core. Keep the core. Listen to the word core. So this is Meira Epstein talking, right? Right. Meira Epstein has a very strong mythos in her chart. You see, whatever I do, I examine it against my own chart. Why am I doing what I'm doing? And I know I have observed my own admittance many, many years, and I've seen it in a number of ways, very subtle and very obvious. One of the keywords for admittance is focus and core and original meaning. Or if you go to the keywords of admittance, you'll see these keywords, origins. So I'm very conservative when it comes to astrology, and I go to the origins and the core meaning of things. So I'm also doing my own chart while I'm talking to you. And that's what happens. Whatever you do it out of your own chart and what's prominent in your own chart. And people who come to me, and you hook up and you stay with me, apparently we share some of these. And people who do not come to me, I never know who they are, they go to other astrologers, they share other things. And that's how it works. So bottom line, repeat, keep your journey with Uranian, but don't feel bad when you cannot interpret everything. Give it a chance, give it time. Don't forget the question, even if you don't have an answer. Keep the questions alive. And that's important. So questions are your intellectual pursuit. That's how the humanity develops, through questions. Questions, eventually you come up with an answer. And sometimes you can have an answer and you think that's the answer. A few years down the road, you say, was not a good answer. I think there's something else. Keep going, don't give up. And it will serve you very well. You do traditional, you do Uranian, don't tell yourself that you have to interpret everything. So you'll feel better about it, okay? Okay. Always go back to the core, your starting point. Where did I start with? Can I see it? If I cannot see it, maybe next time I'll see it, okay? Okay. Wow. This was half an hour of that. But it's important because once you go to the Uranian, you get inundated with all the details and you can give up and say, I cannot handle it, and you walk away. Don't walk away. Stay with that. Enjoy whatever you do see. You'll learn a lot. Okay. So now I have a lot of topics that I was planning to cover, and then I got two questions in the email, one from Kilo, one from Rosanna, and I'm not sure which to tackle first, but I will. And again, folks, whatever we cover in 4 weeks, we cover, because your questions are so valuable, because they are your intellectual pursuit. That's what you're heading. because you're not resting on your laurel. You also continue and continue. So I'd love to tackle that. And however much we cover, we cover. So let me start with Rosanna because that's kind of relatively easy. And now am I sharing my screen? Not yet? Not yet, okay. Let me see which document I have open. Actually, it's in the email. I'll open the email. Yes. Share. Share. Okay, so this is email from Rosanna, and it's about a book by um, um, Roger Jacobson. There are a few books about Uranian. I have that book. I don't know when I looked at it last, but I have it in my library in New York. Because after the Witte, there came a few people who wrote a few books. Not much, thank goodness, because once people write too many books, it gets, again, bastardized. So they try to explain the system again, what's behind it. So what Rosanna noted is the following, and I'm reading, I cannot make it any larger, but no, I cannot make it any larger, but can you see the text? It's in the, okay.
Yep.
I was wondering why Alfred Witte had some different sign rulership. That's the topic. Sign rulership. Please see attached picture from the book, and it's further down. I'll show you. And the name of the book is The Language of Uranian Astrology by Roger Jacobson. Was this something that was never adopted by Uranian astrologer? That's the question. Another question is retrograde of 3 Is this purely mathematical calculation, since they are not really planets? At least I thought so. And what might be a retrograde TNP means? Okay, there's a technical. I do not know the exact computation. The exact computation happens when, in the computation of a position of a planet, and that applies to all planets, everything. How did they create ephemeris? Ephemeris is position in the zodiac. So by observing a planet over a period of time, see the speed, see where it's going, and that becomes the ephemeris. Is that clear? Okay? Now, Witte did the same with trans-Neptunian, but did not from a telescope. So how could he have done that? And I'm not speculating, but it's the logical way. By observing, I think mostly trans-Neptunian with the sun, combination with the sun, and making an assumption about the meaning and so on. So there was a lot of process of, let's call it intuition plus computation that led him to come up with the fact that there is a planet there and what it means. That's all I can say. But observing it over time, you can come up with numbers. I think the phrase was called elements, the elements of the orbits. And these are the numbers of the orbits, where a planet is at any given moment in time. So if you collect enough elements like that, enough points in zodiacal points, you can, it's a trajectory. You can assume that this is what the orbit is. So in this process, they came up with even retrograde. I don't want to keep going because if I go more technical, I need to go into the back to the astronomy and so on with the planetary system and all the whole topic of retrograde. But the point is that based on these assumptions, where that thing is, that new body, which you call Volcanus, or you call Cupido, whatever, based on these computations, you come up with an ephemeris, and that's what they did. So so the answer to the question is mathematical as a result, because they're not observed by telescope. It's mathematical, but it's done in the same way that other planets are computed, based on the assumption where they are. Okay. Next is that page. So the topic is rulership, and remember I told you that we don't have signs. We don't use zodiacal signs, the traditional zodiacal signs, and that's the main practice. But Witte had them, and nobody really uses them. So they're interesting. They're intellectual curiosity, I call it, but I don't know if anybody uses them. Well, one of the reasons is because we have so much on the dial with the trans-Neptunian planets. You don't want to add one more thing, or I don't want to. Plus, if I am going to add rulership that's different from traditional, I'm giving myself a big headache, and I'm not about to do that because I am fanatic about the traditional rulership. And if you add or change it, you're giving yourself one more headache. And and as a result, it becomes anything goes. You can prove anything you want. You change this and you change that, and you say, well, it's the new rule. That rule is old. I have a new rule. And astrologers have done it many times and continue, especially in the 20th century. So we have to be careful. But Witte did it. Witte lived in another universe, kind of. Because what he came up with is incredible, and you know that it takes another different kind of mind to even go that way. But here's the text, that page, and so let's read what's on the page. Very easy to read, okay? So I'm reading from the text with a few comments. Alfred Witte expanded upon ancient planetary rulership. See, you call it ancient, which is correct, of course. And remember, Witte was a traditionalist. Witte knew traditional. Witte did not come out of nowhere. Witte and his generation, they grew up on classical astrology. Are you with me on that? That's what they had, classical. They also had Johannes Kepler, who broke some rules. I talked about it when we started. You remember the things I said about the connection with Kepler? I'm not repeating that. So Kepler, on the one hand, was the one who rejected rulership completely. Kepler rejected it completely on the same from the ground. And Kepler was the one who wanted to establish astrology on purely mathematical basis. So this is the background that Witte came from. So he did both. He kind of changed rulership. He did not reject it, but changed it. And he created a whole new mathematics on that one with the midpoints and planetary pictures. So I keep reading the text. But so this guy, Jacobson says, unfortunately, present-day astrologers do not, by and large, make much of any rulership scheme. That's a statement by itself. So he said that Uranian astrologers reject it altogether. And I can see that. Those, I told you half an hour ago, I see people who do only Uranian without traditional, so they don't include any of the traditional. They miss out on a lot. And I'm telling you, they miss out a lot by not doing traditional. So he's making this kind of observation. This is probably a mistake. An otherwise unoccupied house. So he's talking about houses, etc. Otherwise unoccupied means no planet in that house. May often be understood in terms of the house position of the ruler of the sign on the cusp, which is what we say traditionally, right? If it's an empty house, you go to the ruler. The danger lies in pushing this idea too far so that one can prove anything whatsoever with any chart under study. Same claim, prove, quote unquote, prove anything. Using rulership like that is not exactly prove anything. So he's exaggerating a little bit because even then you have to be clear. Remember the core, stay with the core. Don't make it up. Don't try to make a new rule just because you don't understand what's going on. Don't make a new rule. Stay with it. So that's the beginning. And here further down, we have the planetary rulership of the signs according to Witte are as follows. So look at this one. Aries, Mars and Vulcanus, Taurus, Venus and Admetus. So he takes the traditional and adds trans-Neptunian, Gemini, Mercury and Apollo, Cancer, Moon and Cronus. Cronus. I'm not sure why Cronus, because Cronus is like Saturn. So maybe because Moon is Cancer and Saturn is the Capricorn is in the opposite side. I don't know. I don't have a rationale for that. I don't have an explanation. And I'm not going to look for it because I don't want to go there. I just want to answer Rosanna's question. That's it. Leo, Sun and Zeus. Interesting. Virgo, Hades. And he adds ancient school Mercury. He says he associates Hades with Virgo, believe it or not. And Libra, Cupid, which is Cupido, ancient school Venus. So he replaces Venus with Cupid, replaces Mercury with Hades. Some Uranian astrology, because of that, or related to that, look at Hades in a chart as the ability to dig deep into details. But you can argue that that quality of digging deep into details can be Hades, not as Mercury, but Hades as Pluto, because Pluto can do the same thing, deep research, and so on. So this is very open-ended. Scorpio, he says Neptune and Pluto together. Go figure, I don't see the Neptune. Sagittarius, Uranus, ancient school, Jupiter. So I have no idea where Witte was coming from, but it's not that he was smoking something. I don't think he did. By the way, he had Sun in Pisces. Would be interesting to look at the chart of Alfred Witte himself, which is very interesting, and I'm not going to do it now. We could do it. We have a good chart for him. But all these new things, he was basing it on all sorts of vibrations and colors and wavelength and all sorts of other things that you're not aware of. He had a color theory because of the distance of the planets from the sun. According to the distances, they have different wavelength. So he created the whole like physical explanation, physics about the orbits, all that stuff. So I say he was smoking something. No, he was not smoking something. He was following the scientific tradition of his time. Remember, we talked about it. Discovery of a new planet was not unheard of, was already a tradition. By Witte's time, two new planets were discovered, Uranus and Neptune. So there was already, call it a tradition, an experience of discovering a new planet and see how they related to the solar system. So he just did the same thing using mathematics. And based on that, he came up with all these rulership also. For Capricorn, he has Saturn only, interesting. For Aquarius, he has Jupiter. And ancient Saturn, good. And Pisces, Poseidon, and the asteroid belt, the belt, not one asteroid, all of them. I don't know which one he meant. Affinity with Neptune, etc. So I do not use it. Now, if you do use it, question is which house system do you apply it to? Placidus, whatever. There are house systems in the Uranian system as well. I kind of mentioned them in passing at the very beginning. I think I said that. If you go back to our first class, I gave you a list of the essentials of the Uranian system. And I think the bottom line, the last one had included different house systems. Do you recall that? If not, go back there and you'll see it. So there's not one house system that they added 6 of them. One of them was called the sun houses, moon houses, earth houses, which is very interesting, the concept, the idea, not the practice. Earth houses, and so on. One of those 6 is called meridian houses. meridian houses. Meridian houses are included in a long list of houses that is even in the NCCR study guide, in a list of houses that people know about. Meridian houses. The topic of houses is huge in astrology. I'm working on it right now, never mind what I'm doing, but I'm clarifying the list and I'm working on a document, big document, which is astronomy, pure astronomy. And in that document, I'm adding a discussion on all the house systems and how they come about, etc., etc. That list includes the meridian houses as well. And I remember lectures, Uranian lectures in our gathering, in our meetings, where whoever was talking included at least one of those house systems. One was meridian, another one was the Earth system. But you don't hear about it anymore. For a simple reason. If you include all that, you'll get lost in detail, you'll be able to prove anything, and you can make any point you want, and it's too much, and it's you lose the picture, you lose your bearing, you lose your mind. Not a good idea. So I decided early on in my Uranian career to draw the line, somewhere. You've got to draw a line. You can later on push the line, include more things, but I do the line at the point of doing the dial, the 90-degree dial, and the midpoints combination, and adding the asteroids, the 4 asteroids, no more. I don't add more than that. But even with the asteroid, I had a big intellectual questions, and then I kind of talked about it a little bit, but it's the same kind of question that we have when we add anything. So even then, I was not clear. When I started with the asteroid, I was not clear if I want to use it or not. Does it add information? And slowly I realized that yes, I can add information. And I showed you some because we covered the asteroid. Remember that? So I showed you how I did it. And the asteroids started working for me only when I put them on the dial. Before the dial, before including the asteroid on the dial, didn't work for me. It was too vague. I couldn't get a good interpretation. But once I included in the dial, it began to work for me, and you saw some of it. So that's where I drew the line. I said, enough. I'm going crazy already. Enough. I have enough information. How do I know I have enough information? I read for a person, and we can talk about their whole life and what bothers them and so on intelligently with all the information that they need, then I know I have it. I don't need more information because sometimes it's not more information, it's more headache than worth it. Okay? So be clear on that. Give yourself permission to not include something. Give yourself permission to not follow everything. Follow what speaks to you. And if it's something in 5 years down the line, something else will speak to you, but it has to be in a clear kind of way, then you can add to your toolkit, to your toolbox. My suggestion. And because astrology has your life with astrology is going to be forever. I know that you will never live without astrology. It's so too deep inside you. Then you will always think about it. You will never forget it. You will never put it away and not use it, one way or another. So you eventually will keep discovering things. Um, an anecdotal story. Many years ago, I'm in a conference. It happened to be in Israel, astrology conference, and I was talking to a guy at the intermission somewhere, and he was ranting and raving about asteroids, all of them. And then I said, and he was describing it in such a way like you can get everything and anything out of it. So I said to him, how do you test your theory? You have to test it. You cannot say something without testing it, in astrology at least. And he looked at me like, funny, what do you mean testing? And I said, testing, if it works in prediction, it's testing. He looked at me like it was a strange idea for him. He didn't realize that he could do that. He said, what do you mean? That's testing. You have to somehow test it. So prediction, if it works in prediction, it makes it more valid. You know that it's valid and you can use it. Not everything works easily with prediction when it comes to asteroid and Uranian, but it's there. And we all remember how we looked at Kealoha's chart. Remember, it was almost the last session or so. And we looked at the Pluto and the Ceres and Mars. Remember that? And we said, and based on that, I came up with the observation of changing, you remember what I said, changing an ideology or belief system, and it had to do with food and nutrition. And Kealoha confirmed it big time. That's testing. That's testing. But even without predictive testing, in the natal chart, just natal, it still has to stand out in such a way that you can call it testing. Okay? You can call it testing. But since it's natal, it's not one event, then you begin to create your own what I call statistics. Your own statistics. So if it repeats in another chart and another chart in the same kind of way, you know you can put your finger on something. So this is my kind of long answer to this business. And apropos statistics, I have a file. I don't think I ever showed it to you. I call it my nuggets. Nuggets. It's a catch-all. It's a repository. I save things. And I save things so I want to remember. So I recently started to create another one in a different way. But I have one nuggets specifically for Uranian stories. So let's see I hope I kept it open right here. Nuggets. Call it nuggets. That's the name of the file. And I started creating it because I began to observe things and I wanted to remember. I didn't want to lose it. So I wanted to record it. So I created the nuggets. Now, at the beginning, I started text. So I'm going to skip all that because that's text. It's there, but it's text. And then I started doing it just like that. Capture the picture from a screenshot, and with a little information so I remember. So this one is, I'll show you a few of them because it's a treasure, it's my little treasure box, this nugget thing. So look at the title, Venus Apollon Polyamory. You know what that is? Having more than one partner at the same time and everybody's happy. Everybody agrees that we don't have committed relationship. Now, polyamory started for me when one of my students said to me, she was married, she said to me, we're doing polyamory. After she got married. She came to me as a student, not married. She got married and I elected her marriage chart. And then 2 children came about, on and on. And then came polyamory in the relationship. And I was like, my God, are you crazy? She said, no, it works very well. I'm not going to continue on the story because there's a story there, how this whole polyamory started and how it evolved and how it actually ended in some way. It's a topic by itself, which I love to discuss in terms of relationship and synastry and all that. But what does the dial say about it? Venus Apollon. Here's a keyword for Apollon. Remember, one of the keywords is many. One of the keywords for Apollon is literally many. So many Venus. Venus with many is many lovers, right? And on the dial, it's here. The arrow is not on a planet, but the arrow is the midpoint of Apollon and Venus. You see that, the red line? So the arrow is the midpoint of Apollon and Venus, and the black dot is on the node. You see here the node? So how is that polyamory? The Apollon gives the word many, Venus gives the word love, and the node gives the word connection and also many, because the nodes are connection with people. There you have it, polyamory. Now, with her case, no, she was not that first case. This is someone else. The first case was this one. I think it was this one. Yes, this one. This was that student. So she has Venus Vulcanus Apollon, okay? And the black dot is on Zeus, okay? And the other arrow is on Hades. So we have, and the midpoint also is Saturn here and midheaven. You see how rich it is? So many combinations in the same place on the same arrow, okay? So how do you do that? Again, you give yourself permission to do it one at a time, not the whole thing together. Then many times the combination that you see on the dial come to you after you know the person, after you've done traditional reading, after a long, see what I'm saying? So when I first read for her, this was not on my radar screen at all. When I first read for her, again, it was that their relationship, then the marriage, then the children. She was trying to conceive and they couldn't get pregnant, so it was fertility discussion, which is, I also have her in my fertility lecture. I have a whole webinar on fertility with Uranian, not something else, on and on. So she was in my life for a good number of years, and then at one point I hear about the change of the relationship. She and her husband decided they do what they want. And they're still married. On paper, they're still married. But they did whatever they want. And they would meet at home and tell each other about those other relationships. And they had children and all this crazy stuff. So once the polyamory came up in my information for her, then I noticed this one. So that was the first time that I even thought about it. And then came to me another student, and up front she said, well, I'm in a relationship with three guys. Three guys. By the way, she's now married to one, and that's it. Not one of those three. This polyamory business ends usually, and it begins but it ends. There's always a choice of one person eventually, in my opinion. But the way it starts and why it starts, what it is in the chart, again, you meet, it's a concept. It exists in modern life. And it's not new. People were cheating and being with more than one person throughout history. Polyamory is not cheating. It's an agreement. But being with more than one person, this is as old as humanity. So every time you come across a situation that's new to you, you go and look for it. Maybe the chart will tell you. Maybe Uranian will tell you something. So that's how I came up with this one. When I became aware of this polyamory, I said, let's see what it can be. And the focus is on Venus. As the starting point is Venus, because that's the relationship. And then you continue with the Venus and what Venus has to say. And this is what I came up with. Because this one is so rich, I'm not going to continue, but the gist of it again is Venus and Venus Vulcanus. So we have not just pollen, but Vulcanus. Vulcanus is super tight. So Venus Vulcanus, this is love with a gusto. Love with a gusto. Remember what I said earlier about Vulcanus. So this is not about influence. This is Venus on steroids. That's a good word. Venus on steroids. Are you with me? Do you know what I mean? Kilo, you know what I mean by that? On steroids. So a lot of energy goes into it. And that's how she was and how she is. I mean, the way she talked about it, the way she talked about that person and on, it was like super Venus because of that. So if you see Venus Vulcanus in a chart like that, and you're not sure what to say, and you don't want to exaggerate because you don't want to make a fool of yourself with the client, then the least you can say is about that Venus is very intense. You see what I'm doing? I changed the keywords a little bit, not much. I use the word intense, which is just as good for Vulcanus. Are you with me? So I'm not creating new keywords. I'm using the existing one and modify a little bit so I can use it without hesitation. See what I'm doing? Okay. So that's this example. And you add Zeus to that. Zeus combined with Venus has to do with fertility. I'm giving you a tip. So fertility issues come up in charts with Zeus, Venus with Zeus. And in that lecture, I explained why, not now. So this is an example of one of my nuggets. And then I have other topics. Look at this bicycles. Would you imagine bicycles as a topic ever? No, right? I think I told you about this one in my introduction about John Kerry, the foreign Secretary of State. I didn't. Okay, I don't see it. Okay, so this is not John Kerry because this is someone else. So I started with John Kerry. This is an example how I approach. This is an approach. So John Kerry is Secretary of State. We're traveling in Europe. He was Secretary of State when Hillary Clinton. No. He was not Secretary of State. Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, and then she appointed him as an ambassador or something. He was traveling. No, I'm sorry. He was Secretary of State at some point, but he also was a candidate with Hillary Clinton. Anyway, he was traveling in Europe in this capacity. And I see in the news a piece of information that said, that's weird. It was that John Kerry was in Europe on a diplomatic mission, and he was riding a bicycle and fell off the bicycle and broke his femur, broke his leg or something, and he was in a hospital. News in the media, and I said, "What's a Secretary of State doing riding a bicycle in Paris when he's on a diplomatic mission?" Apparently, he likes to do that. So I started reading about John Kerry, and turned out that he's an avid, fanatic bicycle rider. Fanatic, he does it all the time. He participates in competition and races, and you name it. That tells you that it's very essential to his life. Then I say, what could be a bicycle in astrology? Again, this is an example of a question. Nobody asked that. Would you imagine asking a question about a bicycle in astrology? Do you know? But that's what I do. I say, if it stands out, if something stands out, I ask the question. What could it be in the Uranian? In the traditional, it would be something maybe with a third house or something. But what about Uranian? And then I went to Admitos. Now, I went to Admitos because I knew why I went to Admitos. One of the keywords for Admitos is rotation. It's a long list for Admitos. One of them is rotation. The wheel of a bicycle is rotation. The wheel rotates. The whole bicycle moves forward, but the wheel rotates. Same as wheels on a car. So it's about wheels, something that rotates and rotates and rotates. So I said, let's see if it's there. And here's what I saw. That it's the arrow is on Admitos. The dot here is on Pluto, okay. Another dot on Zeus, but this one, and this dot is on Saturn. And this tiny dot here is on Mercury. I said, Mercury, that fits. that kind of confirms what I was thinking. But I don't have it traditional here. But what I did do, I looked at the traditional. Remember, cross-reference? Cross-reference. Always go to the traditional. In the traditional, he had some indication that confirmed the Admetus combination. So by combining the traditional and the Admetus here, I said, I think I can see that in the chart. And that's retrospect, 2020 hindsight, because I first read the piece of news and then I went to the chart. Nothing wrong in 2020 hindsight. That's how we learn. Because after John Kerry, I decided to look at other people who are famous for bicycles. This one who I covered here is someone who came to me for a reading in New York City. And I saw and that was after John Kerry. So I saw error on the sun. The midpoint is Admetus and Mercury. So I said, I wonder if he has bicycles in his life, a New York guy. So I asked him if he has bicycles. He said, I ride my bicycle all the time in Central Park. In other words, it's important in his life, so it came up in the chart somewhere. Okay. Now we have an example. I looked at Lance Armstrong, and you remember the name, Lance Armstrong. I'm not showing the details. I look at another cyclist, not well known, an Italian one also, to see if I could see Admetus there as well. So this is my style of research. I come up with something, I try to compare it to others. And that's what I call my statistics. This is not proper statistics. If you're a scientist, Rosanna, you will not call it statistics, but I call it astrological statistics. I collect more examples, and if I can draw a line from one to the other, I think I know, okay, I think I know about Admetus, something about Admetus. So this is bicycle. And then I have lots and lots of these. These are my nuggets. Okay. For instance, more Admetus, Nikola Tesla, but that's not bicycle, that's something else. I'm going to skip that. Franz Kafka, the author, the famous Jewish European writer from 19th century, Franz Kafka. His style of writing is laconic, precise, and short. That's very well known. The Kafka short stories are very, very precise and short, and every word means everything. So it's laconic. Laconic speech Admetus is also laconic, because Admetus with Mercury, Admetus in general, wants to make things compact and short and to the point, very focused. So when it comes to language, it makes the language short, precise, and laconic. And I told you it's strong in my chart. When I was in school, high school, it was, my pain was writing essays. I would write an essay which was 1 page, and it was very hard for me. Look at me now, I write tons of stuff. In those days, writing was my biggest pain in high school. And the teachers always said, yes, it's good, but it's too short. That was always the comment, 1 page. It's good, but too short. I remember other students in my class, they would write pages and pages, and the teachers loved them. And I was so jealous, but I just couldn't. It didn't come. I didn't have the ideas. What's my point? When you have the idea, you have what to say, you say it. Those days, all those essays, I had nothing to say about that. So it just didn't work. It was the bane of my existence. I never got a good grade on that, never. Look at me now. I think I should go back and show my teachers that I can write. It was amazing. I'll never forget that experience. That Admetus did it. So this is Franz Kafka. And again, arrow on Admetus. Look at that. Arrow on Admetus, midpoint of Saturn and Mercury. You couldn't get better than that to describe that, because Saturn, Mercury is also about writing, can be also about writing, and so on. And the other arrow is on midheaven. When the midheaven, when the angles are involved in any combination, it's big time important, big time descriptive. So these are the nuggets collection. Again, more admitos. Then I have a food series. I have tons of stuff on series. My friend Marilyn, who was a chef, still food. Another one, a client. All about a series. Julia Child, the famous chef, Julia Child. Let's look at her a little, just a little, and then we leave it alone. Arrow on series. The other arrow is on Chronos. You see that, Chronos? When Cronus is involved with something, it becomes professional. Cronus is so wonderful. So when Cronus is involved with something, it becomes something that you do extremely well on a high, excellent level. So it's professional. That's Julia Child. On and on and on. This document is very long and I keep adding to it. If you look at the Julia Child traditional chart, you will not see that. This really jumps off the page on the dial. So don't give up on anything. Always do the work. And if you don't see it, you don't see it. If you see it, rejoice. Be happy and tell me about it. I have a colleague, and every time I come upon something that I didn't see before, I have to tell it to someone. So I write to her and tell her, say, guess what I saw? What I saw. Because it's like one more thing. Okay, so that's the nugget combination. So again, the reason I'm telling you all these things in order to encourage you to not give up. That's it. Now, Kialoa is addressing, looks like that's what we're going to do tonight, but it's important. Rosanna sent me a chart and I analyzed it and I have it ready for the class, but we'll see if we can start it or not. So let me continue. And one sec. Yeah. Kialoa is referring to the document which I sent you, the PDF. Okay. Kialoa was in an email referring to Planetary Pictures in the Uranian system. The topic came up towards the end of our previous course, and I said to you that I skipped it in the introduction to the system. I skipped it, and I told you that, and I focused only on midpoints. Remember that, right? I only midpoints. But then I felt that I was not doing justice to the system and to you because the concept, the phrase planetary pictures appears in many places. And I think that even you, Kialo, at the time mentioned the A plus B minus C and all that stuff. So I realized I need to do a good job on that. Originally, a number of years back, I did have that included in the document which I went through with you, that PDF, that presentation. I did have. And I realized that I omitted it for some reason. I eliminated it. I don't know why. Actually, I do know why, because it's complex and it's not suitable for basic introduction of uranium. It's too complex. However, the phrase planetary pictures shows everywhere. It's in this NCGF study guide. It's all over. The phrase, the concept of planetary pictures. So I decided to do it again. I did have the original document, but I elaborated it big time. I worked on it and covered all the details that I figured necessary, including the mathematics of it, so that if you read it closely, and when I sent it to you, and I sent it to you after the last class. So I don't know who read it, who didn't read it, anybody paid attention, but obviously Kialoa paid attention. Good. So my instruction was read it closely, step by step, because I am doing it that way, logically, step by step, one step leads to the next. And if you can read it carefully with basic middle school or high school arithmetic or algebra, you know what I'm doing. It's very simple. So that was my assumption that any one of our my student can read it and they don't even need my explanation. So I want to assume that that was the case. Kialoa, since you did read it, was that clear enough, all these steps?
Yes, it was clear. Like it takes attention, it takes mindfulness.
Can you say it again? I didn't hear you.
Yes, it was clear. It takes mindfulness. You need to concentrate and be in in this field of yours to understand
Yeah.
how you communicate. Yeah, for me it was clear, but it does demand attention.
I remember I did it for the first time again, million years ago. We had a group in the city, in New York City. We had a group, we met occasionally to discuss Uranian system. And then one of those meetings, we said, okay, what are we going to do next? And it occurred to me that I want to understand the A plus B minus C, because until that point, I had no idea where this is coming from. What is it? So I decided to look into it and present it to the group. And I came up with these explanations and I presented it to the group. They couldn't care less. They didn't relate to it, to the whole mathematics stuff. They wanted interpretation, interpretation, interpretation. Fine. So the benefit was not the group. I benefited from that because that put me on my journey because I needed to understand that. So that was why I did it and when I did it. So that was the first time I tackled it. And now I completed it with images and pictures and detailed. So that's the background for this paper. And for the life of me, I didn't understand how A plus B minus C can be a midpoint. Didn't look like midpoint. So what is it? So on the dial, you see the image with the red arrow. Visually, it's a midpoint, easy to relate to, right? Visually clear midpoint. A plus B minus C is not visual for that, just numbers, plus and minus. So I needed to know how we get from here to there. How does a midpoint become A plus B minus C? And that's what I did. So I sat down and drew things on paper until I figured it out. It's my whole life, this my learning process. When I don't understand something, I sit down with a piece of paper and I begin to think. And then I come up with this. So throughout my career, even in computers stuff,
Just
computer
a
systems.
note on that. It's an insight. Perhaps that's a Demetrius that grounds you and makes you focus.
You bet. I am so focused when I do these things. Yes, it's admittals, but then you can add a few other things. So it's not one thing in my chart, but it becomes a bottom line. That's my approach to study. But for years and years and years, I knew that about me. I knew that that's how I learn, but I did not have an explanation why I'm like that until I discovered my admittals and I understood why I am that way. So you begin to observe about yourself or others without an explanation, and then something comes up, and then you have the explanation. Because I knew that about myself all my life since early on. Yeah, and I had quite a few instances in my life where I remember working on something exactly with a piece of paper, sitting down and trying different things until it came to me. Okay, with this one, for instance, with this is the midpoint explanation. So I started by adding numbers. This was my starting point for the midpoint. I did a graph from 0 to 11. This is a graph, okay, coordinate system, graph. 0, 1, 2, 3, etc., numbers. And I put the A and the B on the graph. I put A on number 2, I put B on number 8. Therefore, the midpoint is number 5. That's arithmetical. And then I decided, okay, how can I get from these numbers to this one? And this is what I created here. This is algebra, literally algebra. And my notes take you through the steps one by one. If you don't remember algebra, this is it. Simple algebra, basic algebra. Do you recognize that in algebra? When you have an expression, a plus b in parentheses times 2, and then, no, I'll say it again. A plus b divided by 2, which is an average. You can get rid of the divisor, the 2, by multiplying by 2. That's algebra from way back. Everybody say yes, we remember, right? I see Jill nodding. Rosanna, I know. Fine. That's how I did it. So this is algebra. You multiply by 2 on one side of the equation, so you multiply by 2 on the other side of the equation, and then you can take the 2 out and so on. So all this is spelled out word by word by word. All you need to do is read it and remember the algebra, and you have it. So no, I'm not going to repeat that. So this satisfied me. This gave me the understanding of, here it is, 2 plus 8 minus 5, A plus B minus C. That's the midpoint. That's it. So of course you can do it by adding the numbers literally, but you don't need to. You go to the dial, bingo, it's visual. So when do we use this writing, A and B and C? If you're writing an article, if you read an old style Uranian article, you may see that, because some of the writers will use it, okay? You can also see it in, let me do it again. So this is a midpoint. Then I continued, the next step was Planetary Pictures, which is A plus B minus equal D. So now we have 4 points, not 3. So it continues here, Planetary Pictures, and here we have the 4 points. And I'm not going to repeat all the algebra here, but these are the 4 points. And here's the D. The D is here. So I'm showing in this one how we can compute the D based on these algebraically. Fine. Now, here is visual. I deliberately created the visual image of the Planetary Pictures, while A plus B minus C equal D is not visual, it's numbers. And then my bottom line is that, and it's somewhere here, that reading at the bottom line somewhere, I don't remember where I wrote it, but hold on. Observing midpoints from the pictures, predictive, no, not that. I think it's here, yes. Yes. So here is in purple. A in Sun plus Jupiter minus Zeus equal Vulcanus. A plus B minus C equal D, okay? Are you with me so far? 2 planets and a plus, then a minus, then equal, and another planet. A plus. If you follow my explanation, you will realize that this can be understood as this one. This formula can be understood as Sun plus Zeus equal Vulcanus plus Zeus. I'm sorry, Sun plus Jupiter equal Vulcanus plus Zeus, algebraically. Now, algebraically, you have the plus and the equal. So that can be understood as, I don't know if I said, hold on 1 second. I said somewhere that it's the midpoint of Sun and Jupiter is the same midpoint as Vulcanus and Zeus. That's what it means. And it's in the document. So now it described a whole midpoint setup, like a midpoint tree. It's described with a plus and a minus, with the pluses and so on. So you have to follow the document to see why that is so. But this is what it is. 2 midpoints, one Sun Jupiter, the other one is Vulcanus and Zeus, and they share the same midpoint. They share it. So I also show this on the dial, the images. Now I want to show you a nova, how it looks, because it's a nova. And that's the part I skipped. I skipped at the beginning because I said this is too much. I deliberately skipped it. And so now I'm opening a nova. And this one is Werner for Brown. We'll talk about him next time. Werner for Brown. This one is in NRA. If you're American, you know about the NRA. Hello, you know about the NRA? National Rifle Association. The American people have a whole association for the right to own guns. It's the gun problems in the United States. That's what it is. The NRA is part of it. And my point is that Zeus, the planet Zeus, the Uranian Zeus, is part of that one. But that's not what I know to show you. Okay, this is the chart I was going to tell you about tonight. Very interesting situation, so I'll use it now. Just to show you those planetary pictures, how they look. So I'm in Nova now. And this is a person I read for only a couple of days ago. It's so fresh off the press. I'll tell you about it because the Uranian story is very interesting. But what I want to show you the planetary pictures, how they show on the screen. Here's the stuff that I always remove. You see, I get rid of it. You see that one, the bar, the sidebar? The sidebar has a few things. You see the tabs here, pointer, pictures, differences. You see what I'm doing? I completely skipped that one, that part. I deliberately did that because it would have confused the hell out of you if I decided to explain that. Because my goal was to get you going on the basics, the easy one. The easy one is those aspects on the 90-degree dial, the special aspects with all the dots and the midpoints and combining it to get information. And that by itself is big. And again, if you stay with that, you'll be a happy astrologist, I'm telling you. Even without these planetary pictures. Let's say you want the planetary pictures. So I clicked on the tab that says pointer. You see the green here is the pointer? It's a tab. And look at what happens in the list. A plus B minus C. A plus B minus C. You see that? 2 planets with a plus and then minus another planet. So what does that mean? And that's for the pointer. If I put the pointer on the sun, the list will change because different pictures. Okay, so far? Okay. So the example that I have in a document is easier to relate to because I picked specifically something that's easy to see on the dial. So here I'm going to wing it, meaning pick, and that's the last thing we're going to do tonight, okay? I talked about so many things that I didn't plan on talking about, but that's good. Okay, so let's keep the, 1 second, what do I do? What do I want to do? Blah, blah, okay. Okay. Let's see, I'm going to pick someone that might be easier. The arrow is on the sun. So now we have on the sidebar, we have different combinations. And these combinations tell you that the sun is point D in that combination. So you could read it, and I'm doing it slowly. You see here Jupiter and Poseidon and Apollon. You see the red here? I click on it. You see that? You see here, this one? You see that? It's highlighted in blue so you cannot see. So I'll take away the blue And remember what I was looking at, right? You see Jupiter, Poseidon, Apollon, you see that? Okay. Jupiter and Poseidon is A and B, A plus B minus Apollon. And so Apollon is minus C. So where's the D? The sun is the D. The sun completes it to a planetary picture. Are you with me? So this is the idea that this tab on the side tells you about a planet where you put the arrow on, which planetary pictures it completes. Is it clear so far? Okay.
Oh,
The question is only how to interpret that, okay? That's the issue. The technicality is simple. But now, in order to make it more visual, I will remind you that 5 minutes ago I said that this can be understood as two sets of midpoints mathematically. You have to go back to the document for that. So if you have nothing better to do, you're done with watching movies, take the document and read it slowly, step by step. Read the text and examine the example, the visual examples that illustrate what I want to say. If you are a glutton for punishment for mathematics and astrology, but it's very satisfying. I'm telling you, when I came up with this explanation many years ago, I was ecstatic. I was so thrilled because nobody else, I didn't have it from any other source. And then I figured it out and it was very satisfying. So these things are very satisfying if you like the explanation, the process of explanation. That's in the document. But what's the bottom line for planetary pictures? It's a set of two midpoints, two sets of midpoints sharing the same degree, the same spot. So let's see if I can prove it to you. If the sun is D, so look at the formula again, look at the formula. Jupiter plus Poseidon minus Apollon, right? Follow my voice. And so Jupiter and Poseidon is the midpoint. So I think of it as the midpoint of Jupiter and Poseidon. And Apollon with the sun is the other midpoint because according to my explanation in the diagram, in the document. So I'm looking for the midpoint of Jupiter and Poseidon and the midpoint of Apollon and the sun. The sun is here and Apollon is very far. Here is Apollon, okay? Sun is here, Apollon here. I'm not moving the dial because I will need to keep the visual, okay? Sun, arrow is on the sun, and Apollon is where it is. You see I'm circling. You see that? Here's Apollon. So the midpoint visually is going to be somewhere here, okay? Somewhere here between them, or on the other side. Either here or here, the midpoint is going to be there. The other pair is Jupiter and Poseidon. Jupiter and Poseidon. Jupiter is here, and Poseidon is here. So visually, I'm roughly visually. Poseidon here, Jupiter is at the midpoint is about here, right? About here. The sun and Apollon, the midpoint is about here. That means that they're on the same axis, they share the midpoint. So you can, if you need to satisfy your curiosity and see the midpoints visually. Are you with me? If you want to visualize the midpoints, you can do that. I'm going to change the view to 360. Sometimes the 360 helps you visualize. Normally, I do not use 360, but for visualizing things like that, it's very useful. So here it is again. Let me clean the view. I don't want the houses. Come on, view. I don't want house cusps. Okay. So here's the sun and the 1 second. The sun. 1 second. I don't see that repeated. Why am I not seeing it? Here's why I'm not seeing it in the list now. Back to 90-degree dial. Because it's the 90-degree dial, it reached the aspects with the 45s and the semi-square and on the other aspect. Let me change. Let's see if I can do that. 1 second. Where am I? I need the word. Okay. Modulus 360. Yeah, it is 360. Okay. I cannot tell you why I'm not seeing this right now, but the arrow is on the sun. Jupiter, Poseidon, Apollon. On the 360, Jupiter and well, it has to do with the modulus with those aspects. But here's the sun. Let me do it visually. I said it was Jupiter. Why am I not remembering? Okay. It was Jupiter, Poseidon, Apollon, Sun. Okay. Jupiter is here. Poseidon is, come on, well, my brain, here, okay, here, okay? Here's Poseidon and here's Jupiter. So the midpoint between them is about here. I'm going to create it actually right now. Okay. I just created the midpoint between Jupiter and Poseidon, the red line, okay? Okay. Now, and it falls on the moon. Okay. Now we have, I'm looking for the other one, the other midpoint, Sun and Apollon. And the Sun is here, and Apollon is here. So I'm going to do that one, Apollon and the Sun. And the midpoint is here, but the dot is back to the moon. You see the dot? That means sesquiquadrate. Because the 90-degree dial also does the sesquiquadrate and the semi-square. But here it's more visual. It's like saying that the midpoint between the Sun and Apollon makes a sesquiquadrate to the point here, which is also the midpoint, the other midpoint. So don't try to make it too visual. Don't try to make it too visual. And stay with the 90 if you want to. Stay with the 90. And if you want to explore it in terms of interpretation, I'm back to the 90 and I'm back on the Sun. All you need to tell yourself is the following, that Jupiter Poseidon is one midpoint, Apollon the Sun is another midpoint. They share an aspect between them, so they work together. And therefore you are interpreting 4 planets, not 2 planets. 2 midpoints and then another 2 planets and then another 2 planets. Here the Sun is there natally. So the 4 planets already exist in a picture, in a planetary picture. In predictive work, and I said that in the document, that 4th point, that point D may be empty, and then by solar arc, a planet gets to that point, and it completes a picture, and then you can interpret it if you want to. I do not use that, because to interpret 4 planets that only share a midpoint without another planet falling at that midpoint is not meaningful to me. Because if I look at the midpoint, I need the midpoint to be with a planet. Empty midpoint to me is not usable. Are you with me? It becomes usable when it falls on a planet. Becomes usable. It can fall on a planet natally or by progression or solar arc. You see what I'm saying? And let's do this for this one. I'm clicking on solar arc. I didn't. 1 second. Okay. I just created the solar arc around and around. I don't think we've covered that, did we? No, we didn't. Okay. I'm going to eliminate the asteroid. There's too much information. I'm taking out the asteroids. Just the traditional and Neptunians. Okay. Okay. So again, I say last thing, famous last word. The planets on the short stick closer to the wheel, they're the natal position. Natal position. The planets on the long stick on the outside, they are the solar arc positions. Are you with me? We will do it again next time. So I'm clicking on let's say the midheaven. Her midheaven is on Zeus. So midheaven came to Zeus. That's an aspect. But it also falls on some midpoints, such as Node here and Kronos here. You see that? That's a midpoint. Neptune here and Jupiter here. Neptune and Jupiter are natal positions, and natally they do have Zeus at the midpoint. Let's go to another one. I'll go to a solar arc point that's not on a planet. Let's say Venus, okay? Venus. I clicked on solar arc Venus. Are you with me? There's no planet here, just solar arc itself, okay? But that place, this solar arc position, hits the midpoint of Cupido here and Venus here. See that? The same solar arc Venus hits on the midpoint of the node here and Mars here. So now I have a story to tell the client, because that solar arc Venus is activating those midpoints. Natally, those midpoints are not populated. I'm removing the solar arc now, back to normal. Now let me do it again, 1 second. 1 second. Okay. So this is, I'm going to do the Cupido and Venus, okay? Again, midpoint of Cupido and Venus. Natally, nothing on that midpoint, but the solar arc is there now. Cupido and Venus. So here's Cupido and Venus natally. Here's the midpoint between them. There's no planet on the arrow, right? But solar arc Venus is now there. I showed you, okay? That means that this natal midpoint is now activated by Venus. That's the meaning of that. And it's more than good enough for predictive work. If you add to this the planetary pictures, you'll never see the light of day and you'll be extremely confused. Kealoha, this is for you, because in your email you told me what you're trying to do. So my strong suggestion, while you're learning, while you're getting used to it, stick with midpoints. And then you can add the 4 planets, because those are more midpoints. So the goal of that paper was to show you that those A plus B minus C equal D is actually midpoints, but it's a lot more. And it can confuse you, and you'll never know what's what. Because even just with midpoints, there's so much information, so much. And even then, because there's so much information, I don't use all of them. I'm telling you, I pick and choose. And here is what I mean by that for this particular person. So I'm going back to the solar arc. Back to solar arc. I have now natal and solar arc. Natal is the short stick, solar arc is the long stick. If I put the arrow on all of them, I'll find tons of midpoints being activated. How do I choose? How do I know which one is important? I'm not going to start now, but I can tell you that this particular person was very interested. The topic was relationship, big time relationship discussion. When and who and how, all that stuff. And I go to the dial and I see that solar arc Venus connected with natal Venus and Cupido. Both Venus and Cupido is very much about relationship, love connections. And solar arc Venus is now right on top of that. So this is relevant to the reading. You see what I'm telling you? I'm using what's relevant to the reading. Otherwise, you'll never see the light of day. Too much. So pick and choose for the topic you're discussing. Don't try to do everything at once. Strong suggestion. I'll see you next week, okay? And that's going to be Thursday. We continue with Thursday. Well, yeah, I gave you lots to think about and lots of work, a lot of work for me, what I want to teach next. So we have a lot of stuff to talk about. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.